Shalom, welcome to Rob on the Rock. I'm Rob Van Hoff, and today I want to talk about the spelling of Hebrew names within the Bible itself and in transliteration and in other texts and even inscriptions. I think this will be a fun and informative video for you. So one of the fun things for students of Biblical Hebrew is to learn to write and to spell out the names of people from Bible history, of course. And in some cases, however, there's more than one spelling available. I'll give you a big example here that's probably pretty easy, is Jacob. Okay, Jacob. Oops, we spell that this way in English. In Hebrew, it's Yod, Ayin, Kuf, Bet. In a vast majority of times, we have the vocalization like this. Yaakov, Yaakov. But sometimes it is spelled Yaakov with Cholam and the Vav. The whole Vav is there. Yaakov, Yaakov. Not a big deal. We can see this happen with a variety of names. Another spelling variant, though, that is a little more interesting, I think, is for the name Joseph. Now, the standard spelling is Yud, Vav, Samek, Pe Sofit, right? We have Cholam and a Tzere here, Yosef. But, we do have one place that is in Psalm 81 where it's spelled quite differently. Yod, He, Vav, Samek, Pe Sofit, Yehosef. 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 Pretty interesting, huh? And we actually have some rabbinic inscriptions from the Mishnaic era in Galilee that have the same spelling, Yehosef, Yehosef. And we know that it's the same name. It's within the Psalms, we know that where it says Yehosef, it's talking about Joseph. There's even a more interesting than that scenario is for the name Isaac. Now, of course, in English, we spell Isaac is your standard spelling, which comes from the Latin, which comes from the Greek. In Hebrew, the original spelling for Isaac is Yod, Tzadi, Chet, Kuf, like this. And it's a Hirik, a Shavah, and then a Kamatz. Yitzchak. But we have a few times, Jeremiah and in Amos, where Isaac is spelled differently. It's spelled Yod, Sin, Chet, Kuf, Hirik, Tzere, Yishak. It still means laughter, or he will laugh, of course, but a big spelling variation between the tzadi and the sin. So Yitzchak and Yishak. This is how it's spelled within the Tanakh. Of course, there's only, I think, 3 times where it is spelled in this variant way. But within the Tanakh is not the only place where we see such a variant. I have an example here from the Dead Sea Scrolls, where we have a manuscript that is from the Herodian period, and it is not a biblical scroll. It is a fragment that is a retelling of the story of Abraham and Isaac. And I'll show you here. We have here at the line, if you can see my cursor, it says Vayikra et Shemo Yishak. Yishak, and it's Yod, Samek, Chet, Kuf. You call his name Isaac, but then we also have it spelled on the very same manuscript, Yod, Sin, Chet, Kuf. Now this, in the Qumran unvocalized text, this sin could be a sheen or a sin. We're presuming it to be a sin. So on the very same text here, you can see, oops, I went a little bit too far. You can see here Yod, Samek, Chet, Kuf, and here Yod, Sin, Chet, Kuf. So what we see then is another type of spelling of the name Isaac. And it is, I could fit it in over here, I guess, besides. Yod, Samek, Het, Kuf, Yitzchak. So, we've got some variation here on how to spell the name Isaac. Well, guess what? We even have more if we extend into how the name Isaac was transliterated into Greek. In the Septuagint, we call that the LXX for short, means the 70. The first Greek translation of the Torah into any language, actually, but from Hebrew into Greek, it is spelled Yoda, Samek, or Sigma, I guess, in Greek, Sigma, Alpha, Alpha, Kappa. Yoda, Sigma, Alpha, Alpha, Kappa. Yitzchak. And the apostolic writings follow the same spelling, Isaac. Now, Josephus, however, who was an educated Jew from the first century, towards the end of the first century, he wrote after the time of the apostles. Josephus spelled it like this: Yoda, Sigma, Alpha, only one alpha though, Kappa, and then he put what we call the inflected endings, Isakos. And if it would be of Isaac, it would be Isaku, like this. And if it was going to be for Isaac, it would be Isako, like that. And if Isaac was the direct object of the sentence, Isakon, like that. So what Josephus does, he takes a step that was not taken by the Septuagint. The Septuagint and the apostolic writings just retain Isaac wherever. It doesn't matter if it's the subject, if it's the direct object or indirect object or the genitive, doesn't matter. It's just always a transliterated Hebrew name, or Hebrew name rather, transliterated into Greek, always the same. But what Josephus does, he innovates. He gets rid of one of the alphas, and then he puts what we call our case endings on the end. Now, it could be because Josephus is writing for Gentiles in Greek, and so he is simplifying the names of the people from, the famous names from the Tanakh for his Gentile audiences. Whereas the apostolic writings, in that they're speaking with communities that are Jewish as well as Jewish and Gentile, who have some use of the Septuagint or Greek tradition that is older than Josephus. From remember that the Septuagint is, at least the Torah, is 3rd century BC, whereas Josephus is the end of the 1st century. So there could be presumably 200 to 300 years between the Septuagint and Josephus, 200 to 300 year difference here. Now, there's another place we can look. I'm going to erase all these additions here, and then scroll up just a little, and we're going to look at rabbinic inscriptions we have. So we have rabbinic Greek, which is from inscriptions from the famous Jewish cemetery in Beth Shearim up in the northwest Galilee. And they have inscriptions that have the Hebrew, for example, Yitzchak, like this. Oops. Yitzchak, got that jumped on me there. As well as it in the same inscription in Greek. So we have Hebrew Yitzchak, but look at this, Isakos. Isakos. So now we have not only the ending like Josephus did, it's pretty much the same spelling that Josephus does, but we have an epsilon, or what looks like an E to us, at the beginning. Did you see that? But that's not the end of it, because also in the same place in Bet Shearim, there's also the name Isaac spelled Iota, Sigma, Alpha, Kappa, like that. Isaac, as well as Epsilon, Iota, Sigma, Alpha, Kappa, without the inflected endings. So what do we learn from this? We learn that there's quite a variety of ways that a name could be spelled, a very popular name. Now, in our day, maybe sometimes there's a name that's the same name that sounds the same, but it's spelled differently. Someone might choose to spell their name differently just to have a special spelling or to differentiate themselves from the way other people with the same name spell theirs, even though out loud it sounds like it's the same name. There could be that kind of element, or influence behind these various spellings. Don't know for sure, but it apparently was okay. It was okay to have these various spellings, and I like that because it helps us appreciate the fluidity of language, especially over the centuries. Like with the name Isaac here, we've looked over 1,500 years or more of time in two different languages. We saw in Hebrew, we spelled it three different ways between a tzadi or a sin or a samek. In Greek, we've seen it in the ways that we see here. And together, we can see this variety as representing fluidity and subjectivity and freedom. And there are no language police roaming around enforcing a certain spelling for a name. Rather, the different scribes and authors used the convention that they wanted to. Now, the last point I want to make is that for the name Yeshua, what we see is consistency throughout. So, while it's true that in originally we see Yehoshua, the name Yehoshua, and it becomes shortened to Yeshua in the Aramaic texts, Yeshua, and then we see it spelled pretty much consistently. Oops, I misspelled it already there. Yesu with the endings. Now, we do have one place in the Septuagint, I think it's Chronicles, there might be more than one, but just a few, where it's spelled Yeshua, which got a little epsilon at the end, but that is the odd one out. Jesus with the sigma, reflecting, like we saw with Isakos, the nominative case. But whether it's Josephus, whether it's the LXX or Josephus or the apostolic writings, or whether it's rabbinic inscription, we pretty much see Jesus as the name for Joshua or Yehoshua or Yeshua. So while we can look at a name like Isaac and we see all this variation, with the name Yeshua, we see almost zero variation. And I think that has to do with the popularity of the name Yehoshua ben Nun in Greek writings. And because maybe it already was inflected earlier on, that is Yesu or Yesun with a nu at the end if it was a direct object, that it held strong. Whereas Isaac, sometimes they wrote it with the inflection, sometimes without. And so it had variation depending on locality and the training of the scribes, and maybe even the dialect of the speakers. Were they Aramaic speakers speaking Greek? Were they Hebrew speakers learning Greek? Were they Greek speakers learning a little bit of Hebrew or learning a little bit Aramaic? A lot of those questions we can't answer. But all we have here is the data from texts and from inscriptions, and that's what I wanted to share with you today. So be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and if you know anybody who you think that they would be interested in these videos, be sure to share the link with them as well. Shalom.